This is the Watchman giving a clarion call. And today I want to take a moment to give a bird's eye view of the fiscal and economic health of the United States. Because now and again, it's healthy to be reminded of what we face and why we're doing what we're doing. All this stacking, preparing, and staying on top of every headline. So I've kept an eagle eye out for the last several weeks and picked several things out, four things, which clearly showcase and indicate that the unbelievable trouble the West is in is not going away. Firstly, the debt ceiling will be raised yet again any moment to just under 20 trillion buckaroos. Now, while the American states, who are all under bondage to the despotic city-state we call Washington, D.C., while they continue to slave away in order to make the record tax receipts possible, it's unbelievably still not even scratching the paint of DC's profligate spending. There's still roughly $1 trillion deficit every year. Now, I sure hope there's no one out there listening to this who thinks that there's a ghost of a chance that DC will do the right thing on this point. Washington is an empire fueled by debt, and changing that would quite literally kill it. Washington has raised the debt ceiling 74 times since the 1960s, and this occasion will be no different. Now, while I agree with those who bash Boehner and McConnell as being first-rate globalist stooges, let's be fair here. Let's not have any delusions that there are any conservatives or folks anywhere who will freeze the spending and the debt limit. They're just not going to do it. I mean, after all, the debt ceiling in 1981 during the Reagan administration was only $1 trillion. Unbelievable. The U.S. had a cap, quote, on itself at $1 trillion during Reagan's first years. And by the way, Reagan, often billed as a fiscal conservative, raised the debt ceiling roughly 18 times. So let's be clear, a ceiling that's always raised is no ceiling at all. The Treasury will continue to issue trillions in new debt every year, but most importantly, the system is so terminal that the council, the only council and course of action that we all need, which is to freeze the debt limit and even default on much of the debt that's already been incurred, is the only counsel, the only path that no one is allowed to consider. Secondly, the fast food mega corporation McDonald's is in enormous trouble right now. For years, McDonald's has been a bellwether on the health of the poor and middle class, engaging where their confidence levels were at of the overall economy and what their spending habits were allowed to be within their perimeters of income. Now, the better the McDonald's earnings were, the healthier the overall job and situation was perceived to be for many consumers. Now, however, the warning signs are all flashing red because McDonald's earnings are dismally bad and have been for months. Earnings have been so horrible that the company has stopped even publishing monthly sales figures. And not only that, but hundreds of McDonald's stores are closing in the U.S. In April, it was announced that roughly 700 franchises, 700 locations, were going to be shuttering forever. And one franchise owner even said, quote, "We are in the throes of a deep depression and nothing is changing. Probably 30% of operators are insolvent." And one, end quote, and one owner even went as far as to speculate that McDonald's is literally, quote, facing its final days, end quote. Now, personally, I don't believe McDonald's is on its last days, but it's quite telling how poorly they're doing, especially in the US. Yes, some consumers, some customers are just eating other more healthy alternatives. That's true. That's partially what's going on, but not most of them. Okay, in most of those cases, even with EBT cards being accepted, folks just don't have the cash to spend, even on, you know, dollar value menus. Okay, thirdly, a record number of people are now selling their blood plasma just to pay their home bills. This, folks, this is serious. How desperate must people be growing to do this? Okay, donating blood plasma is an often uncomfortable process that takes several hours to complete and usually only pays 25 to 30 bucks. The high-end places will pay closer to 50, but that's still not a great deal of payoff for what you go through to donate that plasma. And I think this line from the LA Times says it all. Quote, "It's disturbing to see so many people so destitute, even if they're working, that they've resorted to selling bodily fluids. Okay, for their trouble, they make something akin to minimum wage while billions of dollars flow into corporate bank accounts." And that's precisely correct, because the plasma industry is now $20 billion a year globally. $20 billion. And most of it comes from the US. Now, it's one thing to take an extra job if you feel the pinch on your budget, folks, but when you feel forced to sit for hours and literally empty your veins just to keep the lights or gas on, you are in a full-blown depression, and any talk of a recovery is a cynically vicious lie. And lastly, a record number of college grads are now living at home with their parents. In fact, the percentage figure of 25-year-olds living at home is now an unbelievable 50%. 1 in 2 folks who finish college will still be living with their mom and dad 3 years after the fact. Now, there are several reasons for this disturbing phenomenon. I mean, college costs more than ever due to cheap credit from the U.S. government, and total student debt has now ballooned to over $1.3 trillion. But more crucially, the number of quality jobs in the jobs market has not recovered. Okay, most new jobs being added have been waiter jobs and bartending jobs, and you don't certainly need a degree for those. So if you spend all that cash on a degree, yet can't find any work with that degree to pay off that degree, then you certainly won't be able to usually afford to live in a place of your own. And that's exactly what's happened. And that's another reason why the housing economy is so unstable and really hasn't come back up to the previous levels that it was at before 2008. Now, that's what has happened. Tens of millions of people are living with their parents because they have very limited job prospects. They can't afford their own housing. They need to fast-track their debt payments. And this trend is not going away because good jobs have not come back. Because there is no recovery. There never was a recovery. We are in a depression. And only central bank money printing in the trillions, combined with food stamps being issued to 50 million citizens, and an utterly levitated stock market is vaguely masking the true level and nature of deterioration within civic life within the United States. The idea of America being bankrupt is becoming ever more mainstream, as the country once seen as the gold standard of virtue and wealth continues its irrevocable slide to irrelevance and mediocrity. Now, Lenin once said that the way to, quote, crush the bourgeoisie is to grind them between the millstones of taxation and inflation. And that's exactly what has happened. America has now become a giant grist mill where the middle class is being ground into a fine powder between those two stones of crushing taxation for ever more corporate and federal debt and creeping inflation. And there is zero doubt this is happening. Zero. It is absolutely occurring. The golden era of American opportunities in the current system is sadly, by and large, over with. And this is why we are stacking. This is why we are staying abreast of the world economic situation and why the political and banking class has zero credibility whatsoever. You must never trust these people. You must never trust them. You must trust your own instincts here. It feels like a depression because it is one. And you must slave on, tax slaves, because Washington has ever more monuments to build to themselves and ever more wars to fight in places that no one can even find on a map. As your livelihoods, infrastructure, and futures are left to rot. This is the watchman given a clarion call. Stay vigilant and bring the fight to them.